think we are crack-a-lackin'. Hiya, folks. I'm late, and I'm sorry. We had a person over here fixing something to do with their plumbing, and so we cannot interrupt the flow of the gardening in our backyard. So we got that fixed. Okay, I hope everybody's having a good day. I've had a really long day, but that's okay. Really long days are all right. Hiya, Linda. Linda, I've written down in the book your suggestion. I just forgot to respond to it because I was running around at the time, so I missed that. We dropped our son off at the airport this morning, so our whole routine is all up in the air. But here we are. Coffee. Okay, so last couple days, I'm going to get into today's page in just 1 second, but just a quick thought beforehand. The last few days I've talked about a couple of things, and one of which is this. It's the using a single marker and with a chisel tip and a regular old pen, and sitting down with the marker and laying in the shadows and light, leaving out the light areas, of course, and then putting in just areas that would be high contrast shadow in our compositions, and doing it in a nice loose, chunky kind of a way, but using the chisel tip. I don't know if I remember to say use the chisel tip and not the regular marker point or a brush marker. Use a chisel tip. It's just something about the chisel tip that it gives you so much more versatility. And included in this, these examples of these three different colors, I talked about sketching and how sketching some ideas and some things can really help you to understand, how to look at objects and how to understand objects in three-dimensional form. Hi, Marsh. Welcome aboard. Yes, I just started, Marsh. I'm sorry. Our external tap was getting fixed, so I'm a few minutes late, and I'm sorry, everybody. So then we took from this process that we were going over together, and we talked about a tomato and an apple, and then we put together this quick composition for a page, and then we did today's one-page story from that. And so some of the things that I outlined, like that I was going to do, like stretching the composition a little bit, and moving a couple of the characters and making the characters all of a uniform size, and you can do this with layering, where you just copy the same image over a few different layers and omit the parts that you want to remove around those layers. So basically do a little cutout of the two guys that are jumping and falling, and then that way you can reduce their size down. You can manipulate where their placement is and change the angle of it, and then the same goes for the diver down at the bottom. I moved them much more over so that there was a little bit more balance in that composition from, and I'll put this up one more time, the original image itself. So you can see how it's shorter here. These guys are larger, and I'll just switch back one more time. So watch for these things change. So there you can see how you can take your compositions, and because you've been working traditionally, but then the application of a photo manipulative program like Photoshop or something similar to it, lets you adjust your drawing and refine it a little bit. And so that's a nice feeling, to be able to do that and to omit some errata that's on your page, little things like, the marks, the arrow marks that we put down, or an inconsistency in the gray tone in the background. So those little things that helps you mesh together your drawing. I'm just having fun. I didn't have a one-page suggestion for this page. And I talked yesterday about how we can look at the one-page suggestions and to see if I was going to be cheeky, I'd start, well, this applies to this. I don't entirely think that's fair, so I didn't do it, because ideally the idea is to interpret the suggestion in and of itself. So one of the things I want to talk about, though, was this. So for today, I'm going to jump the camera and one more time. There we go. Hey, it's the book. Thanks everybody who's been picking up the book. But the last few days has been really, there's been some movement here happening, and man, I appreciate that. I'm having a hard time getting Amazon to release my data, because there's this whole followers. When you have 20 followers, then we'll tell you your data. But not people that are purchasing the book don't necessarily follow or know to follow, because let's be honest, I just noticed that. And so they're still not releasing my data on sales. I've been trying to track them manually to figure out how I can do something responsibly to show my appreciation to folks. And yeah, just followers. It's ridiculous. We live in an age today where everybody on every platform has to, tag themselves in, connect themselves to, in order for justification of some kind for either the individual or for in all honesty, probably the systemics and tracking people and seeing who's connected to what. Okay, I want to talk about something fun. What? Fun? So, I'll switch up the colors here. So, one of the things, now, yesterday, we talked about closing your eyes and trying to think about an object. And really think about what you can do with that. As you're drawing, and close your eyes and think about the form and the dimension of it, the underlying structure that makes it up, and what its purpose is. Like what it's a fruit. That fruit has a hard skin in order to protect the meaty center. The difference between apples and oranges, and how there's this semi-porous membrane that circles the orange in and of itself, and to again work as a protector for the juicy, meaty, substance that's within the center. All these. Now I'm just using fruit as examples, but some of the things that we can do with objects, like something as random as fruit, is we can draw them out, but then we can start to look at the facets of it. A couple leaves, a stem. Here's the body of the fruit, right? Well, what if were we to reapply ourselves to that and try to look at that and use that, something as simple and as basic as an apple, and think about how can we apply this form and use this form as our foundational basis for something else. I did a jelly-plated surface one-page story, and it had a pretty successful transfer of a car on it, semi-successful, anyways. And I don't want to just trace a car, but what I can do is utilize that car image, invert it, turn it upside down, and that's the foundation. That's the structural foundation of doing a spaceship. And so I had a spaceship story to do, so that's what I used it for. And it's just turning an object, in this case on its in 180 degrees in order to utilize it for something else. But we can do the same things with the way that we understand the structure and form of an object. So I'm going to zoom in for a sec, and you can see, clickety click, barber trick. There we go. So here's our apple, okay? And drawing our apple and having an understanding of that, well, why don't we play with these shapes a little bit? So I started fiddling around with the stem and the leaves, and I started thinking about, oh, well, you could kind of make an interesting flying doodly-doo for some sort of future-based story for that. So on the same page that I'm, sketching out and exploring all kinds of this science fiction-y elements, in reminiscence of my childhood, I thought, well, let's play with this a little bit. So I started drawing these different perspectives on an Apple ship, and then here's its landing gear. Here's another perspective of it. Add some complicated surface to it, And I was thinking a lot about this, about how we can just possibly utilize opportunities like that. A big problem with using resource images to draw from is that oftentimes, as a person's using a resource image to draw from, it becomes less about the spirit of drawing, and it becomes, at times, more about replicating the resource image. And then, oftentimes when people are doing that, they can feel somewhat uninspired in the process. And it happens, I've seen it happen a number of times, where somebody will be looking on their phone as they're drawing something. In this context, I can think of an example from the Comic Jam, and they're looking at their phone, and their phone died. And so they didn't believe that they could finish this panel because they didn't have the image to refer to. So it really became less a case of the inspiration of the source image and more of the reinterpretation of it. Jim says, "I love me this dang drawing show." Jim, I don't know if you have a chance, but Jim has a new channel on YouTube where he's producing a whole bunch of records, a whole bunch of different kinds of music. And I think, Jim, if you've got the link for that on your main channel, that would be great. But for people to be able to link over to that, because it's really interesting, the stuff that's being produced there. Marsh says, "I just found out today that Dr. Seuss had a list of words to use to create the Cat in the Hat. He just chose the first two that rhymed to come up with the whole idea of the book." Why not? Why not? Why not allow yourself the simplest of inspiration and run from that? Apple spaceship, from an apple. And look up La Magma Music, folks. La Magma Music. And actually, Linda, if you can find that link, that'd be great. But I'm really enjoying the albums that you're producing, Jim. And one of those albums had the theme song for the show. So I've got to learn how to put that onto YouTube, because if I'm on StreamYard, I can do it there. But I don't know how to put the song onto the YouTube videos yet. I'm learning. Anyways, so Jim says, "I'll put it on the YouTube for you." Ooh, love it. Thank you, Jim. So one of the things I thought we could play with is this notion of taking an object and looking at how do we interpret this in different ways. So I'm going to do something a little bit different than I did yesterday. I'm going to look up the book first, and I think I didn't do. I love how Jim was able to drastically change the timbre of his voice to sing the intro into the show. Yes, very much so. It's a modulative effect that makes it sound like a lady singing. It's pretty impressive. If you've watched the Artcasters broadcasts that are on Josh Campbell, Corey Kerr, and Scott Circlin's channels on YouTube, that opens up with Artcasters, and it's Axl Rose singing their theme song via Jim Luan. Okay, so I started a couple things. I started a page called Living Dolls, and I did nothing with it. And Jeff says, "Those aren't me." No? Oh, that's awesome. Axel was you. Yes, excellent. Well, that's even cooler. So I started a couple. The Living Doll and a spoiled spaceship's captain is betrayed by her crew. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. I had intended to do this as a one page, and I never did, just because that weekend was a little hectic for us. So I thought, well, now we have a theme. Now we have a suggestion for the page. So a spoiled spaceship captain betrayed by their own crew. Thanks, Linda. Okay, so some of the things that we can do is to play with the notion that we have before us. So we've got some images now. I prefer to think of it as Luanian magic. Luanian magic, folks. Yeah. So, I mean, I can pick and choose some of the images out of these sketch pages that I've done and populate some of the images, some of the panels with this imagery. I mean, that's one alternative that presents itself for us. And I kind of like that, to explore that idea. But we really do need to figure out our captain. So I thought, you know, why don't we chase that down a little bit? There's so many different ways that you know, we can look at story and talk about story and introduce story. But I thought it's just more random doodles. I thought we'd explore that. I'm going to get my book out of the way. Too much in the book. I got paper kicking around here. Alright, so I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. And that is... Hi, it's the book again! I really want to thank Paul Patey. Did a really nice review the other day. Boy, oh boy. Okay, so we've got... I got a clipboard out with some paper on it. And I'm going to turn it to its side. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. Please check out the link in the comments, folks. Okay, so I want to try something a slightly different approach here, and that is I'm going to take a green pencil, and we're going to put this into our, you know, this is our principal mark making tool that we're going to do. So we're going to put our layout this way, and I'm going to go a little bit silly today. What? Not you, Chris. Yep. So, what I thought I'd do is that I'm going to really loosely rough in the page. Okay? And one of the things that really loosely roughing in the page does for us is that it strips away, you know, being too caught up in imagery in and of the moment. And it allows us to look at our structure of the story first. So our suggestion is a spoiled spaceship captain betrayed by her crew. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. Okay? So with that in mind, let's look at the breakdowns of the suggestion. We got a spoiled spaceship captain. We got betrayed by the crew. The only way back home, which is more of a plot point than it is a visual element, is on the ship of a rival. It's on the second ship of a rival captain. And that comes from Dee Dee. She found that in a science fiction book. So let's see. We got those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, really, and the suggestion in and of itself. So if I come at this in a really loose and sketchy kind of way, and then we'll pull out from this a more refined image, but underneath it we're going to have these fun little scribble lines. That's what I'm going to try today, folks, and we'll see how it goes. Now I can either use a colored pencil or I can use a black and white pencil. This one will end up probably being a little more color mixed media. This one will probably end up being a little more black and white. If anybody has a particular, now is the time. But let me know. Okay. Uh-oh, and retracted a massage. I'm gonna drink some coffee. So this is a similar thing to the drawing in light and dark, right? Is that this is another approach to, I thought I'd show about laying out a page, but maybe that light and dark step might be a bit much. All right, so maybe instead we jump to, or we step back, I'm sorry, to scribbling. I'm going to use a pencil, but we're going to alter this up a little bit because this pencil needs to be a whole lot happier. No, it's only going to fit this now. Well, that's okay. That's all right. Okay, so I've got this pencil here in front of me, and so spoiled spaceship captain, betrayed by the crew. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. So let's start putting in. So what we'll do is we'll lay in some shapes. I'm going to do the zoom in with the camera so you can see. And occasionally I will pull back out again for the scope, the larger size of the image, right? So you can understand the relationship of things. Oh, and was just double checking the link. Excellent. Okay, so here is our form for our captain. Okay, and then in behind that, I think that it might be a fun idea to have another person standing over here, you know, with their hands on their hips and a sort of, you did this yourself, Captain, you know, attitude. All right, so here's our second person in the background, and then that allows us to look at, maybe this will be a cabin on the ship. We'll play with the shapes of the ceiling so that it's not just a box, you know. Little things like putting the bunk inside of the wall or something like that. Just little fun things to just keep the eye moving around, right? And then the bottom of the panel will move across here and the captain will stand in front of it. So there's our first panel breakdown. Really loose, really light, right? So there's our first idea. So we're introducing already the captain, and in the space around the captain here, we can have the dialogue about how the captain has been betrayed by their crew. And, you know, there's a crew person standing behind him going, Captain, you know, with the arms on the hips. Yeah, there we go. So, and we'll just play with those shapes a little bit. Put some more interesting stuff in the walls. The idea of utilizing the space as best as one can. There's the door. Okay, so there's our first rough scribbled panel, right? So we're already identifying point number one. Check. Bingo. And then point of a spoiled ship captain, because she's got. So we'll have this captain. We'll make it be a lady. I said I was going to make it a lady the first time, and so we'll have this captain have this rolled eye look, like ugh. And but we'll get into that in the next step. So there's our start, and crew person standing behind with the hands on the hips, like captain lecturing. So there's our first bit. Spoiled ship captain betrayed by the crew. And so now we can have a turn, and we can turn our image. Let's see if it'll pick up on here. So you can see it's only a sixth of the whole page that we're utilizing now. And in the course of doing this, I've also made a choice of dropping the captain and the bottom line for the captain's form below the bottom line of the panel that the person standing in behind stays in. And that's only to make it a little more interesting. For who? For me! And hopefully the reader. So let's have the captain turn around at this point and say something snarky back. And it says, "It's great music, Jim. I just subscribed." Jim says, "Thanks. It's weird and fun." It's really good is what it is. Okay. So if we've got this crew person here who's saying this stuff, one of the ways that we can differentiate the actions in this conversation is to make sure that the characters are dressed differently, because I'm about to have the captain spin around, and so I'll make this loose sort of a shape, and then we'll have the captain's hand. Let's do this. Let's put the captain's hand in the foreground. Okay, and kind of like listing off things. Okay, one, you guys don't take commands very well, and so maybe this is a fun way to just get right into what the problem at hand is. And so we'll put the thumb up here. So here's the captain listing off their grievances to the crew person. And the reason that I'm going about it in this way and very loosely is that we're just getting the energy of it down, right? And in a second we will come back in and tighten it all up. But for now, let's just get the captain, just going off on their crew person. So I think that this shoulder line is actually going to be lower. Just to make it more interesting. Be more foreshadowing that way. And then we'll put the captain's head a little more this way, so it just sort of catches the energy. Turn it on an angle, and it sort of implies this movement, right? So here's the list of 1. I offered everybody soup and nobody took it. 2, banjo night was a flop because you guys are so against banjos. I don't know what the things that the captain's going to list back as grievances are going to be, but there we are. So there's our second panel blocked in really fast. And, so we can do a rebuttal with our second character and take this image and just make it a little bit larger. So this character says, well, too bad. And we'll do the arm over the shoulder, thumb back. You're out of here. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm off panel doing this. Let me get my big head out of the way. So our third panel is the crew person that we see here. We've got them here now. And they'll be saying, well, too bad. The ship's coming. And you're going. Okay? So there we go. Now we can do one more image here where we've got, and this is where we're going to play in on our apple that we were talking about earlier. We can have our first apple. Again, my camera is a little gonky. Here we go. So here's our first apple, and we'll draw a second apple, right? So there's the meeting of the two ships and the fact that the captain's going to have to move from one to the other. Space, stars, space, exciting and new. Oh no, that's the love boat. Alright, so there's our top half of our page. So if I pull the camera out, you can see that I've got, well, you can't really see it, but there's our top row of panels. And so this is where we can have a little more fun. And as the captain is, so in this case we'll have the captain being led by some of the crew persons. And here's our captain with their head, I'll pop back on in the other camera so you can see a little clearer just because it's so light. So there's their crew members standing in the back. Okay, and then we'll have our captain with their head down, walking to the other ship down this corridor. And on this side we can have, and this goes back to childhood where Mad Comics would be fun, is that we can have a bunch of people laughing their guts out. Your own crew. Right? And this one will have their hand on this one's shoulder and holding on to their gut and laughing as well. So by throwing these quick figures in like so, it just gives us the idea of the panel. And, you know, lets us just get it structured down really quickly so that we can move forward. And because right away I'm going to go into our drawing, our form with the chisel tip marker. So here's the other crew laughing, and as the captain is coming across to the other ship as a captive, and so there'll be the hands. There'll be the hands behind the back as they're walking to the other spaceship, and then our final panel will be, you know, one day I'll have my revenge type thing, and we'll get a shot of the captain looking at the viewer like, oh yeah, one day. Okay, so there's the gist of it. And that takes care of all those key points. A spoiled space captain is betrayed by her own crew. Right? And so despite the arguing, it's happening, you're going. So we got a little bit of character investiture and explaining the fact that the crew wasn't going to put up with her being a bad captain anymore. So here's the transfer of the captain from one spaceship to another. And we're going to use the apple thing we just talked about. There's the captain moving across the hallway to the other crew, and the crew's laughing because this captain is, you know, yeah, you thought you were Mrs. Big Stuff. And then the final panel is the captain looking down the barrel of the lens saying, I'm going to have my revenge. Okay, so there's the gist of it. So let's get right into defining these panels a little bit more. Now, I've got some chisel tip markers that I can use, some different values, some different colors. But why don't we stick with this light blue? Just because I've got it handy. Alright, so this is a water-based sketching marker here. It's called the Artist Series. They're inexpensive. You can find them at places like dollar stores or Walmarts and things like that. And it doesn't have to be fancy tools that you use in order to do your illustrating with, and these things will work fine. But the versatility of having a pointed tip and the chisel tip is it gives you the ability to approach your drawing from two different ways. The captain is an out-of-date avocado. That's why they're spoiled. You want me to put that in the bookmark? Let's see. Someone is an out-of-date avocado. So they're spoiled. So much can be done with that. Alright, so throw it in the book. Thank you, Marsh. Okay, so here we go. We got our first panel. I got this chisel-tipped water-based marker. Now we know we've got some shapes in and around here in this really loose sketch that we've done, and so we're going to take this and we're going to try to put together a little more clearer representation of this panel. Okay, and then that way, I'm sorry, I'm going to put my big nosed face on here. It's just because it helps me to figure out where things are on the screen. All right, so here's the size of our panel. Okay, we got it all on screen right now. I can never time those avocados right. Okay, so we got a crew member standing in the back, we got the captain standing in the front, and we've got spaceship cabin around them, and we've really roughly drawn this in. So let's think about, we're going to put the crew person's costume in, and we're figuring out where, if the lights overhead, you know, we're going to play with where some of those shadows are, and we're going to try to imply some form on our crew person as we do it. Anybody, male or female? Does anybody have a preference of which? I think I'll do a fella on this one. So there's their their boots, and we'll put their lower leg here. Okay, so there's their really roughly put in costume, their uniform, and then there's some shape language for their face. Really basic, really simplified, okay? And then we know in behind them, we suggested that that is where the door to the cabin is. So we'll start making some interesting shapes around here to define our space cabin. And then we'll pick and choose some highlights for that in a moment, right? So here's some fun. We did this spaced out rough for the background, sort of a filter system in the, or air ducts or something like that, in the top corner of the room. So we'll put those marks in like that. And then we can do the same in here as well. All right, now, other side of the door. And then here's this wall. Now, I put something embedded into the wall, like some sort of alcove for like a kitchen or something like that. So we'll put some little items as though they're on the counter. And we're going to clearly define all this stuff, right, in a moment. But in the interim, we're just throwing some structure to the overall shape. Chris, I have a really, really important question. What's your favorite Carpenter song? Well, you can never have enough Carpenter's questions. I don't know, Jim. I've only just begun to dream. But I don't know. Now I've got Carpenter songs going through my head. Hiya, Susanna. Welcome aboard. It says, greetings from little me. Okay, so there's some more definition of our space. Around and the background character really loosely put in. Okay? From our really light, loose sketch. Now, let's put in the captain. Let's define our captain a little more clearly. So we'll give her some hair. Usually when you see captain characters or on space shows, they've always got these really uptight hairstyles. But Karen Carpenter was a really good drummer. And, as she good a singer as she was, she's a great drummer. So our eyes are rolling up. We'll be able to clearly define that a little better in a moment. So I'm using a bit of that chisel tip there. Get a little bit of a shadow. And a sort of a pensive mouth as they're looking out the window. I'm using my finger to blend out instead of having a little darkened area where the water based marker pulls up. Greetings from Little Me sounds like a Carpenter song title. Yeah, it does. I think my favorite Carpenter song was the theme song to Laverne and Shirley. I'm pretty sure that was the Carpenters. Anyways, I want to get my captain long hair, because that's what I want to draw today. It's my drawing. So, and we'll give a collared uniform, and we'll follow that down slope of the shoulder. Same on this side, a little more readily defined now. Find that shadow, the armpit there. So my son is between Calgary and Portland right now, and we're very excited for him. He's on a big adventure. Yeah, same time. Ah. The Runtsmans are invading America. Brace yourselves. Okay, so our composition's coming together now from that roughed out, quickly scribbled in composition that we did. Now we've defined some tonal range, some tonal value to it, right? Given a few shadows to work around with and things like that. And then the last thing I think I said I'd put in was a type of cabin built into the wall, much like the kitchenette is put into the wall. Well, now we've got a cabin here. All right, so we'll get that in there. And then some Fufura space age devices in the room, just to add to the space itself. Okay, so here's our first panel loosely thrown in with the approach that we've taken to just sort of roughing in compositions that we've been doing. I've got a green pen here. Yep, it's green. And let's start putting in some details. So let's start with our captain's face. Let's focus on that for a moment. So we want to have the captain looking indignant. So we'll try to get that down in our, as we're refining our lines. Jim says, I'm going to make 2 songs called Greetings from Little Me and one called Captain Longhair. I believe the subtitle for that should be Dirty Hippie. I don't know. Okay, so we're going to put a collar. So this is where we can take this really loosely assembled image. Now we've just scribbled out our panel, and then we looked at our panel and we tried to understand some of the form and the complexity of light moving around in that panel, and so now we're going to come in and pick and choose like we've been doing with the last couple of things that we're sketching and drawing. Linda says, what's your son's destination? Portland, Oregon. Actually, he's going to be nearby the Lewis and Clark Bridge, which is north of Portland in the state of Oregon, and it connects the state of Oregon and the state of Washington. Okay, so here's our angry captain that we're going to put in here now. As they're listening, the person saying, Captain, if you had da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da, you wouldn't be in this state. That's the suggestion of this panel. That's the dialogue that's happening. So, have our character, their eyes up. We can come back in with a light blue. Put a little shadow in there around the eye. Linda says it's a great road trip. He's flying. Well, not personally. The airplane has the wings, but yeah, he's flying. Dropped them off at. Picked him up at 2 a.m. this morning. Okay, so here is our captain. And there's their long hair. And so the lines, the scribble lines, they're all still here. And so when it's scanned, you're going to see this, oh, what's all this busy business? Why is that still there? One, because I don't care about erasing it all. It's not necessary. And 2, it adds some fun little bits. If there's areas where there's scribbles for things that we really don't want, we can either erase it out or white it out, right? So here is shoulder and shoulder. And so then the question becomes, do we darken the hair or not? So let's put a line from the shoulder over the arm, moving from the neckline right over the arm, and that'll be the colored line in the costume, right? Okay, so here's our captain in the foreground. The reason that I did the captain first is so that we can make sure where their head is, so that now as I go in and draw this, you know, interesting corner of the roof, you know, in the, what is it called? Cabin. Then we've got some idea of shapes. Look at this. This is for Janet. I got a ruler. So it's at this stage that we get a little more specific. Right? So this is where our ruler comes in. Right. So it's a different kind of way. I look at this now and I kind of wish I'd used that green as the base for the scribbling, because then it would have been even a little bit more interesting character in it. It's a different way of plotting out and executing a page, but it's going to work for us. I believe it. I believe in it. Come on now. We'll put the opposite part of the roof on this side as well. It doesn't quite match up, but that's okay. Alright, so there's our ceiling of our crew compartment coming in. I used the ruler for the first line. Oh, sorry, I had to do that off panel. Apologize. Alright, so we can, as we're drawing things in, we can allow ourselves a little more definition. There's the ceiling line, you know, and we'll start putting in some of these details. So if you need to graph out your perspectives, if you need to lay out in advance all of the compositional elements you're drawing, that completely makes sense. This is kind of a seat of the pants approach to things. That is it as refined? No. Sometimes those approaches can be much nicer than what I'm doing here. And sometimes they can be overworked. So it's about finding that balance. Okay, so here's some of these fun shapes that'll make up that background and that wall. Yeah, Oregon sounds very nice. It's we've seen some photos of it. It looks very pretty. I'm not sure if anybody here is close to Oregon or not, but see my son drive by. Go, hey! Welcome to Oregon! Alright, so now is where you really get a sense of the image coming together. And so we took that really scribbly approach with the pencil. We defined some of those forms with the water-based marker, and now we're clarifying some of those forms with a darker line making tool. In this case, I'm using a green pen. And then I'm going to come back in with a white pen in a minute and clean up some of these things, because some of the marks that were made with our marker are very loose, and so as we're tightening that up with our ballpoint, we want to have some clarity in our image. So sometimes you got to pull those little blue marks out. So here's our next crew person. Hands on hips. And even though the shadow defines along the center of the leg, we are going to give a little more shape, a little more volume to that leg. And here their other leg moves in behind the shoulder line. So there we go. To put a lot of emphasis on the eyes, just because it's a person in the background, but we'll define this character a little more in another panel or so, right? Emulate that neck pattern here. And I think what this needs is a zip. There we go. Put that on the captain's uniform as well. Just give a little bit more character, right? Okay, so this image is coming together fine. What's that? Chris, your perspective wouldn't be a little bit wonky if you just used a ruler and a vanishing point. I know. You know my mom's. So now we're going to make some more decisions with these rough shapes that we threw in with that blue. Start to make a little bit more interesting patterns to define this shape and make it some sort of space doodadery. Right? And because we defined some of these lines in the wall on this side, we'll do the same on that side. And we have to make sure to keep that consistent as it moves across. So every now and then I take my pen and I go over to a piece of paper and I turn the tip of my pen over onto a piece of paper towel. And the reason I do that is as I'm drawing, because the ink all comes out, you know, all the same amount all at once around the ball tip. If you draw on the side of it with a pen like I tend to do, the ink dollops up on the opposite side or the top of the pen. And if you turn your pen slightly, suddenly, block, there's your glob of ink on your drawing. Okay, so here is our sleeping compartment as well. All right, so now the particulars of this environment. Everything here serves purpose in that it identifies for us some of the little bits of information and baubles in the background. But it's not necessary to see all the wherefore and whys of the information that is laid out in this environment, because the focus, it's good to have it all there in your drawing so that you can focus on what counts here, and that is the dialogue between these two characters and the fact that you know, we can move that around the drawing because we've put these pieces of detail in here and there and kept these consistently moving through the entirety of the environment, so that, you know, so that when we get to that next stage, everything's ready there for us. Okay, so let's come in now with that white, like I was mentioning, and we can put in a couple of little marks. Just cleaning the tip on the pen. A couple little spots here, just to put some highlight on these parts of the body. Gives this person a little bit of a shine. Just like we'll put a couple little spots in the hair there. I don't know how well they're turning out, but, and then we'll do the same up here for the separation line in the hair. Let's clarify this line across the top of the door. But not a lot. I mean, I'm pretty good with that. So let's darken the hair up. Just so it frames the captain's face and hopefully draws the viewer right there in this paneled image. So there's our first image on our page, and you know, I'm feeling good about how it's coming together. Well, let's get on to the next one. So we want to put this hand in the foreground. Okay, so we're going to slide our panel over, and we're going to put their hand. Well, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Let's use our chisel tip. Let's find the form here. We'll put in these little values here. Little shadow cast on the bottom of the hand. And some separations there between the fingers themselves. And then there'll be a little bit of shadow cast with this, with this thumb. Okay, and this little bit of business here. Now, Robert says, looking good, brother. Hey, thanks very much. Today's suggestion is: a spoiled spaceship captain is betrayed by her crew. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. So there's our first panel. Captain is betrayed by the crew. Alright, so now let's put some shadow underneath that arm as it comes across. And we've got our uniform broke down here already, so we know there's going to be that band on the arm. There'll be some shadow on the shoulder there. The hair is going to drape over the shoulders, we know that for a fact. So we'll do a little bit of a framing there. That hair is divided at the top and the center. So we'll make sure that we keep that similar approach to the hair there. And then we'll move this band around a little bit there. Band, I mean like that side of the haircut there. So we'll put our captain's hair in here. A little bit of a shadow under the chin. And then we'll go to that separation point at the top of the hair. Okay. Now, one of the things I can think about is, in order to show that we're looking at the captain having turned around, we can put a view of what the captain was looking at. So in behind the captain, we can, you know, loosely come in with this shadowed area in order to represent a window looking out into space. So, okay. Oh, one more time, I'm sorry for that. We'll get a little more shadow and definition in the face here. So the captain's going to be telling the crew person off. All right, so there's some of the marks that we've put down in order to define this image. Okay, so we're on step 3, just like we did step 3 here. Okay, and so let's take our dark mark making tool, in this case a green pen, and start to put in some of the, you know, the anatomy of the hand here, as the person saying, okay, 1, you guys don't listen to commands. So we'll do that. Let's bend that finger. Put that thumb, start that thumb in there. Here's the second finger. Third finger will come up. As that thumb defines, like so. Oops, I'm sorry I'm doing that off panel. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get better at that. And we'll define the shape of the arm as it's coming down. We'll put a dark band there. And I'm just going to jump ahead to step 4 here. Put this white band in and cut that back a little bit. So there's the uniform, and the arm is going, 1, you don't listen. Okay, so we're drawing in the same uniform as we drew in the first panel, so we know we've got to put that lined edge, double lined edge there for some piping in the costume. Okay, and then we're going to get into the captain's face as she's getting a little bit upset. Clear off my pen here for a sec. So we'll get that hair in, same as the first panel, right? So we'll put some of that separation there. And there we go. So we'll put, looking at the hair in our first panel, we'll put some more of that to this panel. But I think what I need to do is to have it flipping over the shoulder here, and to have this hair moving into the image this way. This hair moving back behind, this hair moving forward, because it sort of also implies about somebody's turning, right? So I'll pull the camera out in just a sec, and we can see where we're at with the overall composition. Turn off my pen. All right, let's get the eye looking straight forward as the captain is now being confronting to the crew member. So it's a little bit of whipping around with the camera angles here, but, and then we want that expression. Eyebrows turned up, oh, eyebrows turned down, ah, right? And then So come in with our blue marker once more. Use the pointed tip this time. Put a little shadow along the nose. There we go. So there's our captain. And then we know that the collar moves down this way. Okay. And the hair comes over like so. And then we'll darken that hair up in a second. But what we're trying to get across here is the captain just going off on the crew person. So with this, we've got some headway now on the overall composition of the page. So we've made this much progression already in a short amount of time just because we really lightly blocked this all out in pencil. So if we look at the really rudimentary drawings that we did for all of the panels, and that's what we're utilizing for putting our whole page together. But now we've got our captain going off on their crew person about how that they betrayed her, and so now we need a pose from the crew person saying, "You know what? Too bad, sucker." That would be helpful for us. So yeah, so let's do this. Let's put the hands up instead of having this flat arm down. And so I'll zoom in one more time. And let's get this third panel rocking. So we've got our crew person from here. We've already started to define them a little bit. All right? So now, as we go into this, the third panel position, we want to have, so I'm on the wrong tip. Terribly sorry. There's the chisel tip. Here we go. So we want to put their hand up like so, and this way we can have their arms not just limp at the side, but doing something like, excuse me, like that. So, because I just, for some reason, I think that is funnier than, you're out of here. I think a person going, actually, if I could say a couple things. So here's our first image of our crew person there. We'll follow that shadow around with our paneling again, like so. And so just loosely throwing down those shadow shapes. Well, no, because we know the shape. Marsh asks, are you pulling up reference ever when you're doing these? I feel I would need reference for the cabin environment. Well, no, because when I'm doing things like this, let me pop back out again. All right, so when I'm doing things like this in my sketchbooks, and more specifically, this sort of adventure that I've been having, what this is sort of getting into my brain is shapes and volume and space and defining what some interesting little greebles. Greebles are the little ephemera bits that are added on to models or sets. Put some greebles in there, a little bit of some fiddly butts that don't actually do anything, but they just make for a more engaged composition. So as I'm playing with shapes like that, and I'm starting to understand, form like this is my sketch work for the room that we're in now. This is where my brain started thinking along those lines. But when you look at stuff, your brain, catalog it all in your head. Like if you see somebody doing a drawing that has a spaceship in it, look at it for a few seconds and think about, what do they do with the spaceship? And just sort of lock that away in your noggin, and eventually you can pull it back for yourself, for your own usage, right? But I've been drawing for a while, and so it is a little unfair to assume and expect that somebody else is going to be able to scribble some of the things like I scribble. Now other people are going to do it in a much nicer, far more refined way. But if you practice drawing enough, basically you're going to catalog all that stuff in your head. If I'm not sure if people in the stream are familiar with Kim Young-gi, but he passed away in the last couple of years, maybe a year ago. And so there's that finger. But what he would do is sketch all the time. And so that when he did his larger compositions, he's got a lot of this locked in his head, and he's just following his inspiration as he goes. So, but it's just this, it's just Carnegie Hall, folks. Practice, practice, practice. And over time, we each of us develop in our own rate. And okay, so here's the two hands up, making a point of fact, like we had considered in as we were roughing this in, which has nothing to do with the whole "you're out of here" pose, "you're out of here" that we drew in that first panel, because it's not clear enough. So we know we've got his uniform. It has this little flare at the bottom right here, so we'll make sure to put that in. We'll give his body some form, some volume, and there we go. Now we'll start putting the pan legs in, and we can add a little more shadow and things like that to it in a second, but we're really just trying to get, this down here. So the beautiful thing about sketchbooks is the thing I was just referring to. Here's something that I don't show a lot of people, but so with any sketchbooks that I have, let me pull back. There we go. So with any sketch, this is another of my sketchbooks that are on the go, and this is a craft paper sketchbook. But any of the stuff that I'm studying and doing in here is, again, more experimentation and more thinking about some of these elements as I'm drawing them, trying different things out, like very gestural, cartoony style, or a more subtle, emulative approach of trying to make it look like folds and so forth. But as we're experimenting and trying different things in our different drawings, well, this is a finished one-page story, but it lets us have an understanding of face and form, and silly little beeble bobbles here, like this astronaut's one-wheel scooter. I think I need to forget that the internet exists and start intentionally cataloging these references more in my memory. Well, I think that one of the greater challenges that future generations are going to have is the fact that when we grew up, we had memory. Or at least when I grew up. I don't want to make anybody else as old as I am, but when I grew up, we had memory, and we had encyclopedias that were these large tomes, very thick, and it would only cover A through half of B, and you'd have little pictorial imaging going on and maps and things like that as it's talking about countries and exampling peoples and cultures, and a bee, and here's what a bee looks like, but we utilized those in order to pull up what does a bee look like. Here's a bee. And because of that, it made you have to remember more facts. But also, because we didn't have an internet and cellular technology and the like, that you can just open up a thing and here's a picture of a bee, you needed to pull together reference of a bee or study a bee. So as far as it goes for drawing-wise, it makes us think of things. So sometimes let your head go into a flight of fancy, like I'm drawing a hover thing underneath the guy, just because, and drawing plaid on somebody else, or a cat, but trying different tools, making different marks. This is by one of our nieces and nephews, looking at different mark making like this. But on Sundays, So that's another one-page story, done with jelly-plated surface. Here's an octopus at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, so Sundays I do this, okay? And however people feel about this or not, on Sundays, when Lori and I attend a church nearby, I draw the sermons. So as the sermon is going on, I go into my head and I try to visibly draw some of those elements. You know, so there's the ark, there's Noah the builder, here's the ark, the water coming in, here's the ark on the water, you know, and just playing with these things. And so because I don't have resources, I can't look up images while I'm there, I try to think about, and it forces me to think, and it forces me to grow because I don't have reference to be able to access here. So it's just using the old noggin, the old imagination. And I think that because of that, and taking opportunities like that with sketching and drawing, when you have to sit down and draw something, let's take a motorcycle for an example. And you've spent X amount of time already drawing a motorcycle. When you go to draw that thing the next time, there's a part of you that remembers how some of that goes together. So that when you're sitting down, in this case, drawing a motorcycle, you remember how the different components of a bike seem to fit into one another, and you can try to replicate that to some extent with your next drawing. Now, the next drawing after that you do might be better, and so on and so forth, because of repetition, allowing you to really have a defined idea of how a motorcycle per se looks. But that's only going to happen if you allow yourself to engage like that. Now, maybe you're not always going to have avenues or opportunities to draw motorcycles. It doesn't mean you can't just sketch and doodle a motorcycle randomly on your own, just to try to reinforce some of that knowledge that you have about how a motorcycle is defined and built of its component parts. So we're going to draw our crew person, you know, yipping off at her. Actually. So here's our guy with a similar haircut to what I did in the first panel. And then there's the uniform on him.
Actually, if you think about it, you're just giving bad commands.
So there's our drawing of him. Now, because in this panel, we're just looking at this same structure over here. Well, now we can come in with our marker, and because this information in behind us is important, because we've contextualized where he is in the overall environment in the earlier image, right? So in this one, we can just take a little more liberty and push that background back, because we want the reader to focus on what's happening here more so than the information around. So I'm a big advocate of sketch for fun, scribble for fun. And a lot of people, see, we're in an accomplish-based society here, and there's this expectation of finishing an image, doing a thing, you know, finishing a work. Here's a great compositional drawing that I've done, as opposed to just enjoying the moment and drawing for fun in and of itself. And so allow yourself that. Allow yourself, you know, this nonsense. Allow yourself this crazy business, you know, with all of its, you know, because you're going to look in something like this, and you're going to find some little fiddly bit somewhere from this random kaleidoscopic collision of ideas that you've placed down on here, exploring different avenues like turning an apple into spaceships, you know. But you're going to pick stuff out of that, and you're going to pick up on stuff in that, like your go-karts, and utilize those maybe in some other project. But for now, you're just enjoying drawing the go-kart, and you're just in the moment. Joshua Campbell's joined us. How you doing, Joshua? Good to see you. Finally able to catch this live. Oh, yeah, here. The benefits of live. So yeah, so using the chisel tip marker in order to rough in the composition, and then defining some of those elements with a pen can expedite that process. But if it's also a mechanism that you're using in your sketching process, it's going to speed it up a little bit more, because it becomes just a matter of fact, because that tends to be the way that you work. Josh says, Apple spaceships and go-karts sounds like a Richard Scarry book. It does, actually. We have a Richard Scarry board game, kind of like a Candyland type thing, but with Richard Scarry characters. It's very fun. So I'm just going to throw down some of these, lines around the doorway. Fast and dirty. So again, this stuff really doesn't necessarily matter as much as what's going on here. So, there's different ways we can push the one part of the environment back from the other. We can have a little halo outline around our character in the foreground. We can do all kinds of little bits of business, just tone it back, whatever we like. But so now we've got, so let's go back to the page from our roughed in. Clickety click. And there we go. So far now we've got panel 1, and the suggestion is this: a spoiled ship captain is betrayed by her crew. So this is her locked in her cabin, and so here she is arguing the point, and the crew person saying, actually, you're stuck in here whether you like it or not. And she's betrayed by her crew, and the only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. So our next panel image that we're going to do is referring back to the study, and this is where the sketchbook part really can come in. So referring back to turning apples into spaceships. Well, let's put those spaceships in this page now. So we'll take our chisel tip marker, and we will just do, I'll zoom in again for you. I know that it's hard to see like this. You can get a faster system for this. So we're going to take these apple shapes, and we're going to put them in space in relationship to one another. And we came up with this 3-prong bit of business in order to emulate the stem and a couple of leaves, right? The spaceship should be called the Chiselton. The Chiselton. There you go. And she should be called Captain Macintosh. Anyways, so we'll put some of these fun shapes here, and then we'll do the same thing where we've got a couple of lines defining that. Now, I've talked about this. Whoops, I'm not even in camera again. So there's the shapes to represent our spaceships, right? But I did this before, and that's where I'll go around the objects, and we can define the objects in the drawing by leaving those separated from the background. Now the water-based markers, they don't blend well, let's be honest. That's okay. We're okay. We're gonna get by. We're all together. We're all together in this. It's okay, team. So let's take our green pen and define this a little more. And so again, thinking about the study we did of the spaceships. Whoops, I'm sorry. Where are they? There they are. The spaceships that we developed from our knowledge of an apple, right? Here's our spaceships. So we know we've got a big ring on the side, and here's the front of our ship and how it has this little dispensation of space at the top, and there's the first leaf, there's the stem, there's the second leaf as it comes out of the top of the ship. And then we added this flare in our sketch, and we put the bridge across the top like that. Not very big ships, but ships just the same. And then we know that this guy is going to be the same, and so here's the two ships pulling up near to one another as they're about to do the prisoner exchange. A captain who has been removed from their duty because they kept giggling when somebody said duty. You know, you just did too. Duty. And then there's the bridge of that one. And we'll do the same interesting little assembly of shapes in order to abstractly represent those leaves in the stem. So we've now turned our apple into spaceships. And we can have a small vehicle go between the two of them. So if I come back in now with this chisel tip that I've clearly defined our vehicles here. So if I come in and I just add some dark values around them, I'm not worried about it all being pretty and perfect and nicely smooth and blending, because this marker is basically unable to do it. So now I'll come in with this Posca marker and we'll put in some stars. Hopefully those are turning up. And we'll make them appear a little more clearly in just a second. And we can come into our ship and put little emphases on certain parts of it that might catch a little more light now. It's not really turning up with this camera, I'm sorry. So there's that. And I'll come in now once more with a green pen and we will pick out around our stars. A little bit of lining, just to make them sing a little bit more. Now, you can flatten this value, or you can do something like that digitally. You can tighten up your space and add in some better stars in the background, or whatever you want. Doesn't matter, it's your drawing. Do your thing. So, if I pull back now into the top half of the page as we've drawn it, so we've got spoiled spaceship's captain is betrayed by her crew. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. So we've got most of the points across in the suggestion that came through Dee Dee. What we've got left to do is in the ship of a rival captain. So we've got the two ships and the transfer happening between them. But now what we will need to do is have the captain do the walk of shame across to the other ship and then look back out at the reader, the viewer, and let them in on her thoughts. And that way, you know, we have a little connection to our character more personally in a short amount of time, a short amount of space. But at the same time, we've defined all kinds of things here. The disrespect of the crew persons. She turns around and goes, "You guys don't listen to commands. You don't go and get ice cream when I tell you to," you know, whatever it is. And they say, whatever, not caring. And then they switch her between the ships. And as she's being walked across have to be taken back to the Galactic Federation. And so I'll pull in on the quick scribbles that we did of this. So she's the walk of shame. The captain, her rival from the other ship, and their crew are cracking it up and laughing at her. Ha ha! Your own crew turned you in. You're a terrible captain. And then at the end, we'll have a close-up shot of our captain who says, you know, whatever her resolve is at that point. She's like, everybody here is, I hate this place. Everybody here is so rude. You know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But because right now we're just trying to get it all laid out. So that's the gist of it. That's the sort of this fast and dirty approach, that scribbling it down really loosely, stick figuring half of it if we have to, coming in with a chisel tip marker, right? Breaking in the lights and darks, and then coming in with a darker pen and refining the image so that we can have clear representation of the objects and things within it, and that we can add a little more flavor, right? A little more secret sauce. And it's just another example of some of this stuff that I've been doing. It's the same approach. It's just, you know, whatever the latest composition is. This is an orange marker, water-based marker, and a red pen. This is a blue water-based marker and a blue pen. This is a blue water-based marker and a green pen. So all of these different combinations of inexpensive markers, you can take these basic drawing tools and try to work out something lovely with it. You know, Marsh says you're kind of doing the Marvel method all by your lonesome. Yeah, kind of, I guess. I guess the suggestion of an idea, of a plot, of a rough breakdown or idea, no matter what, okay, visually as a creator, as an artist, when somebody gives you a script per se, okay, you need to be able to sit down with this script that describes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And you need to be able to look at, excuse me, your breakdown of a page. Let me get a better marker than this. You'll do. Okay, so you need to break down your page that you're working on. You take these notes. Now, I am a writer-artist, as many other people here, as Josh is, Marsh is. And as a writer-artist, I'm really not interested in just following a writer's directions on, in this panel, have them facing this way. You want to have that happen? You draw it. I know writers are necessary. I do. But I don't want to work with them. And so I look at these key points, like I broke down the key points when we were putting together this page, the key elements that we need in our composition. So I find those and I underline them in the descriptions, right? And so I'm wanting to figure out what these key points are as I'm drawing it out, right? So, like in the case of the spaceship captain, we've got panel 1 is Cap betrayed, right? And, you know, panel 2 is just expounding upon that. This is just exposition between the two to really lock in our characters and to really get people to understand why this has happened, and just allow ourselves a little bit of breathing space in order to clearly define to our reader that the captain's, you know, the crew has decided they didn't want to, you know, follow this captain anymore, and they're really rude about it. And then we go into the switch to the other ship, right? That's this part of the description. The only way back home is on the ship of a rival captain. And then so in this place, I've bulked out 2 pieces of space. One is this, which is the transfer, you know, and chiding, like, you're so dumb, look at you, and, you know, laughing at her. And in this one, you can have in this case, we can say the alternate captain is, that's why I'm a better captain than you are. You know, oh, that's my rival, I hate them. Okay? So that's basically the breakdown that we have for this page today. You know, like another, let's see, what else do I have on this? Jim is exposed at the Oscars. This is a suggestion, okay? Jim exposed at Oscars. All right, that's a suggestion here. Now, the suggestion came from RF. There we go. throw the book away. So, Jim, exposed at the Oscars. So, we can have a couple of different ways of approaching this. One is that we can do like a title card, which is, what you see on a television commercial where they come back from a break and then, it says, the Oscars, and there's the trophy and then over top of the trophy, you can cut right over to, let's say, somebody leaning on the podium and, rifling through the nominees for the following award are, but you can start that dialogue right into here and step it over into your other panel. Right? It's your composition. Allow yourself that. Jim is exposed at the Oscars, so we want to root it into the Oscars by going to a couple things. One is the big trophy, and another one is celebrities spectacularly congratulating one another with awards that everybody else is excluded from. So there they are. The nominees are as follows, and then we can have fun with some little different panel shapes as we show, the nominees, and we can have them reacting in their seats. Like one person's like this one, another one's like, and then Jim's like, however we want to represent the different, award nominees. So there's some fun panel shapes that we can put into place. And then we can do a little panel that cuts across as they're opening the envelope. And they say, the award goes to blah, blah. And then it's Jim. And so then we can have an awful lot of fun as Jim jumps up and goes, yay! It's me! And, so then we have him, and then we'll have a whole bunch of shocked looks from other people in the audience, and we can have a little piece of the stage, and there's the guy on the stage himself as for another panel as Jim accepts his award, and he's not wearing, he's got shorts on. So there's Jim on the front panel collecting his award. Forgot pants. So there is run up aisle. Yay me. And so by having his outfit on, his tuxedo, in this shot makes you think nothing's wrong. And then having the surprised faces of the audience go like this, and as Jim gets up, and then you realize that he's wearing a tuxedo with what do you, the trailers at the bottom there, the tails at the back, but he's still wearing heart-shaped boxers. Jim exposed, the Oscars. There we are. There's our key elements. So we've rooted the Oscars idea up here. We've introduced Jim right here, and then there's the exposition. Or exposing, I guess is the right word. So there are our key points in our suggestion. And so any time that a person gets a script and has to work, or a plot and has to work from that plot, you want to just chop it up and build the story from it, right? Jim's been stuck inside his heart-shaped boxers for weeks. Richard Scarry's Cars and Trucks are things that and things that go as classic. Yeah, we love the Richard Scarry stuff, and we, like I said, we have the Richard Scarry board game for the grandkids, and that our kids played with, and that is such a classic. You instead of rolling a dice or spinning a thing, you pick up a card, and whatever the color on that card is, your character moves to that next color. That next time it appears in the trail. It's so simple and so perfect. But the entire board is a giant Richard Scarry drawing of an entire town, and it's so super fun. And then you're playing different characters from the town. So anyways, this is just basically a tiny piece of plot. But when somebody gives you basic choppy points, you got to work from those. Now, give me a second. I think this might be... No, I thought I had a Kirby collector here. Handy. The Kirby collector... Well, let me show you this. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to reach down and pick it up. There it is. Okay. So, Kirby. Now, this is the thing about Lee's plots, Lee's writing of comics, okay? Now how about they fight a giant robot and a sort of large baby-like alien with like a big brain sort of a look. That's it. That's what he gives him. And calls that writing. It's plots. It's plot development, right? And then Kirby sits down and breaks the whole thing down visually, and he writes notes in there, right? And in his notes is half the dialogue, that is written into the panels, right? Torch is attacked by a sonic sponge, and I can't read the rest of it because it's all cut off, but, which not only and can put out any flame. And so here we have in the dialogue, the thick fire extinguishing masks, trying to catch me and smother me, flame and all. So the alliteration is what Lee would add, right? But the real development of the story from a really loose plot is all Kirby. And so it's not to say that, they weren't both key components to creating these stories, but it's just so much of this is so incredibly impressive for Kirby's illustration work to just really draw the reader in and give him a sense of, like, look at whipping through this tunnel. We're plunging right to the core of the planetoid. That's all it takes is the visual element and a simple explanation. Slackening speed must be nearing the end, so he's slowing down. The end of what? I'm still a prisoner, but now I'm confined with others, the likes of which only exist in nightmares. Like, there's so much interesting stuff that goes on in that, but it's taking very simple breakdowns and like going through gateway to the negative zone, it says in his pencils. And there they are. Barrier. We're going through the barrier. Into a distortion area. It looks weird because the human vision is not developed to see it in its natural state. Hey, we made it. We're through. We're entering into the initial distortion area. Our human vision needs a few minutes to readjust itself. So this is how they work together. This is how Lee and Kirby created things. And that's wonderful. It really is. But if I can find that sort of dynamic with somebody, I'd work on a project. But I kind of have, because getting the suggestions the way I do lets me break stuff like this down with folks and have some fun and not feel any kind of constraint, because there are writers out there that say, there's a funny example by Warren Ellis, and that Warren Ellis example is Big Jack Wanamaker stands in the doorway, or comes into a small cabin, or stands in the doorway of a small cabin, thunderstorm behind him, dripping and soaking wet. The view is from behind him. He's smiling ironically. How does an artist draw someone smiling ironically that's facing the wrong way? This is the difference of how we visualize things, and saying, all these key little pieces of information are great. That helps the artist out immeasurably. But what does smiling ironically? Well, the person's not even looking at the camera to tell you, and they've described this to be in one panel. So, it's a challenging thing to work with writers, because unless they have a real sense of the visual composition and how we can do some, like, the foundational things for us to do to build up page and story, how is that going to work in the nice fluid state? So there's got to be a lot of interaction and engagement between writers and artists, and because it is a principally visual medium to storytell sequentially. Linda says, love your story development. Hey, thanks, Linda. And Joshua Kimball says, Excelsior! So we've broken down another page, but we've got the basic start to our page today, and with the first half of it laid out, we know where we're going to do the other half of it. Initially, this final panel space that's only a circle in pencil was intended for the captain to, everybody in this entire space fleet are jerks. I was going to have that be the closing panel. But just as readily, we can have the other captain, saying, I'm taking you back to Earth. Nobody likes you. That's another opportunity that we can have for concluding the story. And it's the ability to break those things down and allow ourselves to go with the flow of our story. Now, other people, it's really important for them to have everything in place. Everything is structured and broken down and decided upon, and it's completely valid, because that's their working process. And we can't say that they're wrong, because it works for them. If it's working for them, great. If it's not working for them, then we get to go maybe something different. Might work out better for you. But other people can't handle finishing projects because of the perception of constraint. And that's completely valid, as long as they're, still following through in some process and working out the things that they need to work out with their more loose and abstract approach. What it basically is find out what works for you. The thing that I've been advocating in the last few days is try something simple. Scribble it down, break out the lights and the darks with a big clunky tool, and then tighten it all up with a finer tool. And if you have to go in after that and edit out some of the errata, edit out some of the mistakes, putting in little pieces that, like, to put in this divider for her hair, where her hair part's at the top of her head. Not a problem for me. And this line across the top of the doorway that, I'd gone over with this. So whatever the quick and easy way that you find in order to start developing story for yourself, do it. And allow yourself to, if this is something that looks like that may be of benefit for you, jam out a whole bunch of these. One thing you can do is look at an existing comic story that you might like, or say you're reading a novel, okay? Or look at, let's use Richard Scarry, because people have been talking about Richard Scarry. So let's take a quick little Richard Scarry moment. Now figure out how to tell that in a sequential page. Do your version. Don't feel like you're locked in. I can't draw like Richard Scarry. Don't! But draw your own way. The whole idea of that process is to try to figure out different ways for you to structure out that little tiny piece of story, that little moment. You're not worried about, you're not drawing Exodus. You know what I mean? You're not drawing the Odyssey here. We're just talking about, what's the matter, Timmy? I lost my lunch money. How many different ways can we show that on a piece of paper? And I think that when we allow ourselves to do stuff like that, it helps us to more clearly and readily improve ourselves and allow ourselves the openness to be able to improve some of the applications that we put down. So I don't know if that helps, folks. But if doing some examples like this, or doing some of the examples like today, my mouse is not agreeable today, folks. Like what we've done today, talking about sketching out like this, referring back to some of the other pages that have been done recently. The complexity of what you're throwing together doesn't have to be this. This is just as valid. You know, when you meet somebody and they say, "I can't draw a stick figure," well, yes, I bet you they can, right? Because it's circle and stick. It's not a lot to just allow yourself to, rather than setting up the barriers, look at the opportunities. And there's a wonderful book that I've shown on the stream before. It's the history of the Napoleonic Wars, and all the characters are dots. Dots with text above them. Works. Marsh says, I learned a lot from your show. I'm very encouraged to move forward with my comics. Oh, that's really nice of you to say, Marsh. If there's one thing that I am a big booster of, and that is sharing whatever we might know for somebody else to possibly glean something from and help to empower them to pursue the things that they want to pursue and create. So, yeah, if you're getting something from it, I'm really happy. Just to put out a reminder, so the whole point of the new book, that I put out, and the whole point of the stream is, and I showcase this in the book, somebody makes a suggestion. In this case, for the fish challenge, it's an exaggerated lie that's called out immediately. And I take that, and this is me talking about what I'm thinking at the time. Here is some of the way that I create the art. In the case of this, there's some pencil crayon drawings, some acrylic painted fish, and I put together the composition from the suggestion. Right? So, if you have a one-page story idea, whether it's a simple line, like you saw just now with the fishtail, or if it's a piece of dialogue, or if it's 3 words, please feel free to put it in the comments on any of the videos or social media posts that I do on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. On Patreon, I also show the original drawings, the original art, before I have manipulated them and, formatted them digitally using Photoshop to show the prepared page with dialogue on it. So if you want to see those things, that's on Patreon. And please feel free. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Well, unless you're getting really weird. You know what I mean? Like weird, like just have a guy staring. No, that's not weird. I mean, like the whole, that'd be creepy. But yeah, there's no such thing as dumb ideas. There's no such thing as unless it's something with malicious intent or something that's just gross. Anything can be converted into a tale. Anything can be explored as some sort of avenue to look into the human, characteristic of an individual. Even if it's a story about fish. Well, one of the suggestions that I had was that there's always a bigger fish. And so I had a couple of goldfish, and one of them was talking about how they're pretty big in this part of the ocean. And, oh yeah, are you? And a whale swims by, and the second fish says there's always a bigger fish. So that's a human interplay, right? So we're anthropomorphizing the characters into human exposition. So you can do anything with anything, right? Just have fun. Give yourself a challenge. Look up something and scribble a few of these. And if you try doing numerous ones, if you try doing multiple little approaches to the same page, you might find that over the course of those multiple scribbling of the idea down, that you will refine it in a way that you might have missed in the early iteration. So, the first one, okay, I got the gist of it. Second one, it's got a little more flair. And the third one, you've got more dynamic interaction between the panels and more more sophistication in the visual imagery, because you've got a real handle on that story now that you're telling visually in conjunction with the textual part of the story. So yeah, get into it, chop it up, have some fun. I'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. I know I started late today, and I apologize, but I'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. And we're going to go in a different direction tomorrow, and I got something else I want to show you. Also, tomorrow is a book haul, so I got a bunch of books to show folks, and those are always fun. Okay, thanks very much for coming and hanging out, everybody. I hope people got something from what we chatted about today, and if you've got suggestions and ideas or any questions you want, you're always welcome to contact me, and yeah, let's have fun together. Let's make some stories. All right, everybody. Bye for now.